So first and foremost, I cannot believe this is my 5th budget presentation. I think that went by a little too fast for comfort. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I think it's important to note the process of which we do the budget. I think that sometimes it's a misunderstanding, if you will, that council gets this today and we vote on it, and that is not how it works. In fact, we actually start, believe it or not, we're already looking at next year. And so in the fall, we have established a process internally that we focus on our capital improvement plan, which it goes in front of the Planning Commission, and that starts prepping our staff to integrate that into the budget request. And then in November or December, depending on how that falls, City Council actually takes time and does a retreat to strategically plan and make sure that those focused areas that I'll talk about actually in just a few minutes are also presented in that budget. And then in the winter, right when we come back from the holiday, staff takes about 2 months of their time going through the budget, their budget requests, taking into consideration the goals and priority areas that City Council has. And then we end up meeting with Council typically in March. And actually this year, we did an entire Saturday in March, I think it was March 11th, and then met again on Monday, April 3rd for another 4 hours, I think it was. So there is a lot of time and intensity that goes into this budget process. And then this, of course, is the ending focus where Council actually adopts this. So I'm actually taking what was about 80 slides during the budget workshop and condensed it into about 20. So I want to make sure that the public knows that Council has been incredibly engaged in the budget process, as well as staff, and that what we're presenting today are just basically budget highlights. One of the things before I go into the strategic planning process is that one of the goals that Council has had is that we moved into we had been in the past done a 2-year budget cycle, and this is our first year where we're doing a 3-year budget cycle, and we actually we did a forecast for 2 more years after that. So we've actually, in some ways, prepared a 5-year budget, with the first 3 being hopefully where we're going to land. Now, obviously, we can amend as necessary and things of that nature, but we're really proud of being able to bring a 3-year budget to City Council this year. One of the other changes that I had mentioned or had talked about before is the strategic planning process that Council had that they had taken over just before the holiday in November. We actually did a major overhaul of how we do our budget planning. In the past, Council has brought forward some budget initiatives as well as some areas of priority for the staff, and we would merge them and kind of determine what we wanted to do. And this year, we did a much more pointed and concerted effort to really focus on areas that can be measured, areas of change that this community will hear more on as we move forward with this process. But for the sake of the budget conversation, what we have are, you can call them critical success factors. I think the mayor referred to them in his State of the City as priority areas. It's all what it is what are we trying to achieve? Our budget goals meeting some of the needs and the ideas and the strategic vision that Council has. And so without going into too much detail, we have 7 priority areas that many of our budget decisions were made this year. It's economic prosperity, safe, protected, and engaged community, supported infrastructure, accessible transportation, strong regional partnerships, organizational and financial excellence, and healthy and connected invested neighborhoods. So as we went through that process, we worked with City Council to help them and show them all of the things that we were doing within our budget request met these priority areas. So we'll be working on getting more information to our residents about the overall strategic plan, but this is really the priority areas that we based a lot of our budget decisions off this year for the next 3 years. So I always like to get to brass tacks, if you will. People always want to know. They don't really care about the nuts and bolts. What does this look like for us? I know that in the past that's just been a big topic of conversation. So what I put on here is an overview of all of the rates. I'm going to talk about general fund budget first, and then we'll move into water and sanitation, and we'll talk about those in more detail. But in general, I think it's important to note that this year the council has is recommended in this budget to lower the voted millage by 1 more mill. So in 2015, you can note at the top we hit the highest. We ended up having to ask for the entire request that was before our residents, and that was because in 2014 we still had a dip in taxable value. It was unprecedented. Nobody expected taxable value to continue to decline. And it was just in, I believe, in the tax year 14 that we saw our first time ever since 2010, I believe, we finally stopped going into the negatives. And we were going in double digits negative. And so at that point, I remember that year thinking, oh my gosh, we might have to actually lay off if this continues. Unfortunately, it did start to level off. So with that, you can see that in 2016, we were able to lower that voted millage one mil, and we kept that stable for 16 and 17 as we worked our way through those budget years. And now I'm presenting you a 3-year budget with a 3.4552 voted millage. So there's a lot of story in here that I'm going to talk about in just a second, though, about what that really means and some of the other factors that are into our rates. As I said before, you can see here that what I love about this city council is how much that they do take their promises to our residents that we only want to use the voted portion of what we need. So we're not going to continue to be at the top of our millage rate just because we can. And that is one of the glaring things that council has brought to us every budget year, is that we want to be mindful of the budget process, and we want to be mindful of ensuring that we're being the best stewards of our residents' money. So you can just see here a little bit more of the bringing it down in a total of 2 mills in the last 2 years, or 3 years, if you will. This is an interesting graph to see, if you will. One of the things that has also happened is that we're now going to be impacted by the Headley rollback in Proposal A. So again, when we were seeing a taxable decline, that was not a factor. But when we started seeing a rise in our property values and very low inflationary rates, we started getting tacked on the Headley portion of losing some mills. So you can see through the next few years that without a choice, over the next 2 years, you're going to see another reduction of over 1.5 mills because of the Headley rollback. About a half a mil each year is what we're anticipating we're going to lose. So it was actually a much bigger deal that council was able to lower the voted portion, because we're still going to be seeing a loss in that taxable value. So last year we had a rate of inflation of only 0.9%. Wait, Cheryl, is this year in 0.9 or last year was 0.9?
This year is 0.97. Last year was 0.9.
I'm talking about the inflation rate. I think we're only getting 0.9 was this year. Last year was 0.3. So we're not even getting an inflation. That's not even cost of living. Right. So while it's a pleasure to be able to talk about, this lowering of the voted millage, it's still a struggle financially, and it's a very complicated story to tell. Municipal finance is very confusing. So it's just one of those things that we're still not out of the woods, if you will. We're still going to be having to manage a continual deficit. We're not going to be able to get ahead. And I know that's very frustrating for residents, because they see my properties increase value by 25, 30%. The city shouldn't have financial issues. This should be done. We shouldn't even have to have the voted. But the problem is we're not able to recoup the money as fast as it declined. I have a couple more slides just to kind of show you. You can see that orange portion is the voted portion of the millage, but you can see that line. It shows you that the revenue is really remained pretty stable, and above that green line is just from 2009. That's the only increase we have seen. So we're seeing our rate of decline, I think, was at like 17%, but our rate of return is much smaller than that, like 3 or 4%. So it's a very slow moving scale upwards. In fact, at one time it was predicted that municipalities would be where they were in 2008, 9, in 2020. Not even close, not even close. So I know that there's a lot of conversations moving around right now in the state of understanding that this is a significant issue for communities, not to mention the loss in revenue sharing as well. It's been a huge impact to our budgets. So that is just kind of where we are in general as it relates to the state of our revenue and our finances. So we've had to be very careful and very concerted on lowering that millage, and I think that we have a really good, solid foundation for our budget, having a 5-year capital improvement plan as well as our strategic plan, and now we have presented a 3-year budget with a total of a 5-year forecast, which I believe was really helpful in making the decisions that we made as it relates to lowering that millage and understanding what that looked like, and do we feel very comfortable with our decision. So I think now that we kind of have that background, I'm just going to touch on some budget highlights. And again, when working with City Council, I think it was an 80-page PowerPoint, of which I'd be happy to share with anybody who wants to see that. We are going to have a budget book that'll have a lot more detail that people can see within the next couple of weeks. But what I wanted to do was really focus on the budget highlights, and what we did internally was focus on what, as a resident, what am I getting? What is this budget going to bring to me? So that's kind of where I focused, because otherwise we would be here for, well, we met for like 12 hours in total. I don't think anybody wants that. So if there's any questions, please feel free to interrupt. In the area of technology, I know, again, that's probably the most unsexy thing about government, but it really isn't anymore. So many people are really using and wanting technology within their community. So there's a couple things that this community is going to see. One of the things that we've requested in our capital improvement is a gigabit fiber. I'm not going to go into too many details, but that just means it's a very fast internet, to be blunt. But that's going to lay the groundwork for not only for our organization to be able to manage all of the things that are going online, but it's going to start to set the stage for us to allow some groundwork to be had for more public spaces with Wi-Fi. It's one of the key components that we'll need to start looking at, more of that public component. We're not sure what that looks like yet. There's a lot of options there, but that's one of the key components of that. Not to mention, there are so many more services that we provide now that are online that require us to use bandwidth that is causing a slowdown. So we want to provide the best services we can to our community. And as always, we always want to say that we are open for business here at City Hall, but for those that want to use the internet to do as much work as they can with the city, that's what will help that process as well. The other thing that they're going to see, that our residents are going to see, is SeeClick Fix is coming in the next couple of months. This is going to be basically allowing the city to be open 24/7 for you, so you can be able to provide a concern or report a service disruption or anything that you need can be done right online. What we like about that, we're going to be able to track that. So we're going to make sure that people are being followed up with. We're going to be able to look at our process and go, what can we do to shorten that process? But also, what's going on? Are we noticing that this particular area has these particular issues? And we can start to take a look at that and map that and understand and actually look at more prevention rather than reaction. So SeeClick Fix we're very excited, is coming in the next couple of months. It will be a good addition to we're also doing an upgrade to our website using the tools and the analytics that we've had for the last few years to make sure that we're providing the best website as well for those that want to use the internet to access City Hall. So again, it's kind of boring in some ways, but for a lot of people who want to use technology to participate in their local government or get what they need, we're setting the way to make that easier for folks. This is a big one. City Clerk actually has a lot of changes happening for this next year. Starting with new election equipment. I think that's a crucial conversation to have. Our equipment is fairly old. They're working with Oakland County to identify the new workstations and tablets and things of that nature, or the tabulators. So that will be coming, we believe, by the November election, Marnie, is that correct? So we'll have new equipment, which will be faster, help line management, and that kind of thing. We also, one of the things that we are working with on the clerk's office is online data management. So we have off-site storage everywhere. The box is full of information that is sitting in multiple locations to be safe and dry, if you will. And what we want to do is be able to get as much of that online as possible. This is, again, helping us to participate more in open data, allowing people to access more information, and also for us to have that information. So right now, depending on what year and what you're looking for, we might have to go off-site, order the box, go through the box, that kind of thing. So we'll be looking at getting as much of that online as we can, and really redoing and looking at our records management to allow much more open accessible government for those that are interested, because nothing is more fun to wade through documents. So, but you would be surprised at how much information that there is for people there. So that will be a change in that department. In police, combined police and drug forfeiture. One of the things that we brought forward last year was the community policing, which was our community engagement officer. We have budgeted that for the next 2 years. It was a 3-year demonstration project or pilot project, if you will, which has seen great success so far. A second program that we're working with is our partnership with the schools and creating a cadet program. As you know, we've partnered with the Ferndale Public Schools in their early college program. We'd like to put even more teeth into that program and provide an opportunity for some of these students to get real life experience in the police department, in particular for those that are interested in the criminal justice aspect. So we'll be bringing, we'll call them cadets, part-time throughout the summer and during around their school schedules, and that will hopefully start as well this summer. Another thing that has been a huge topic of conversation that will come out of drug forfeiture is the conversation of body cameras. So our department has been doing thorough research over the last year to find out what is the best cameras, what can integrate currently into our systems that we have in our car, in our in-car video, and things of that nature. And so now that we will begin the process of looking at purchasing those through the research that we've had, and also looking and retooling our policies in order to best address the use of body cameras. So again, for our residents, we're continually trying to be as engaged as possible, and our whole goal in everything that we do is to be proactive more than reactive, and I think that's been a common theme over the last couple of budget years. Another area that I didn't put in here that comes up, council asks quite a few years ago, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, we started assisting and helping with youth assistance and putting in and offering them some funds to help with their drug resistance programs and things of that nature. We did budget $4,000, as we have for the last few years, in the drug forfeiture funds, so that is there as well. Community and economic development, a couple of the highlights there that people will be happy to hear about is, again, we actually had to funnel this a little bit differently. They had a lot of one-time expenses that are coming out. So two key components that are coming out of the Community and Economic Development Department is the screening wall. We're near 8 Mile with the railroad, as well as quiet zone implementation. Both of those are being reimbursed through CN. So it's a pass-through account, but we needed to account for that in the budget. So because we do have to pay for it and then we get paid back. So that is being paid in full by the CN Rail. So both of those should be, the quiet zones for sure will be in no later than the end of the summer, and the sound wall will be in construction. You'll notice a huge uptick in permits this year in community and economic development due to some large developments that are there. Again, these are one-time revenue generators. We aren't planning on having that high of permits over the next few years. So you'll notice an uptick in some of our contract numbers. In particular, we use Safe Build for a lot of building inspections and things of that nature. This allows us to move up and down depending on the height of development of what we're doing and how many people we need. So we'll see there's lots of changes with them, and their budget changes drastically over the course of these 3 years based on what they expect for permits. Another change that you'll see in community and economic development, which we're really excited about, is hiring another planner that's focused on environmental sustainability. The FESC, along with a lot of the things that we have been doing here within our organization, have been focused on environmental sustainability, but we kind of hit a wall, if you will, as it relates to there's so many amazing things that you can do that we just are not equipped to handle. We don't have the skill sets on staff for that. So this particular planner not only will be able to help in the planning department with general planning, but we'll be able to really focus our area of everything that we do, from every park that we plan to development to buildings, things of that nature. How are we best providing environmental sustainability practices in there? And so that has been, I think our community has really rallied around ensuring that we're protecting and using the environment to the best of our ability, and this position is really going to help us with that in the area of planning, but also be able to use them in other ways as well. So we're really excited about the potential that this position will bring to the skill sets to our organization. And this is actually, this planner, this position, because of the nature of it, a lot of it being in roads and water and things of that nature, it gets disseminated through a bunch of funds, and so it's not just a general fund expense, and that's really important to ensure that all areas that we do within this community, that we focus on the environmental sustainability portion of everything that we do. Public services. This is another one. This is an extension of the things that we have already prioritized, the tree canopy being one of them. One of the things that we've done beyond continuation of assessing our tree stock and the plan in place to continue to ensure that we have good trees, the right amount of trees, the right trees, things of that nature, that we're going to keep that going. But we've gone even further with that as part of the master land use plan and strategic planning was, what are we providing our residents for assistance, and are we bringing the right skill sets within our organization? And so we'll be bringing on a company or a contractor, if you will, it's an arborist that will be able to help not only with DPW and some of these key issues, but also a support system for our residents when they have issues with their trees and they need help and assistance in figuring out what to do. You know, we get a lot of questions, but I'm not sure if this tree is dying. Is this the right species? I'd like to get a new tree. What should I do? We're going to be able to have the right people on board to really take a look and help our residents. So it's not only for us, but for our residents. One of the things that we haven't talked about a lot, but we've kind of sporadically started having conversations about is one of the things that we can't forget is that our organization has a lot of facilities. And while we've worked on renovating this one in the police department and the court building, one of our buildings that is starting to see some major disrepair is our DPW building. So what we need to do at least is to assess what is the longevity of that building, what does that look like, because one of the things that council here does really well is we're always looking ahead, and we need to be able to be prepared for that building, and it's every year it gets a little bit worse. So we need to do at least first an assessment of what does that look like, what is the longevity of that building, and so that would be the first step before we decide what's next. Parks. We've talked a lot about parks. What we have done is that our goal is over the next 2 years is to be able to really focus on the $2 million that our residents approved in 2015. Really take a look at getting really moving on some of those big projects, such as maybe a splash pad per se or whatnot. But we'll be focusing on over the next 2 years using that $2 million to really boost our park system. But not only have we done that, we are also including in capital money every year to keep going with our parks and to make sure that we're constantly putting money into them and ensuring that they're meeting the needs of those neighborhoods. We did, as you know, we just merged Parks and Recreation, and one of their goals will be to really take a look at how are our parks connecting to our community and our neighborhoods. I think we all know that it used to be your local school was your anchor to your neighborhood, but with schools of choice, that's really changed. And we really want our parks to be a representative of the community of which they are in. So hopefully you're going to start to see really the growth and the development of our parks and how they're all going to have their own little personality. So really excited about that. There's a lot more to come on that. But I just thought it was important to note that not only do we have that $2 million, but we have budgeted for the next few years more money out of capital to make sure that we keep that going. This is actually that was the end of our general fund. I just wanted to show that you can see that our revenues have stayed very consistent. We are not anticipating putting any more money into our fund balance. By keeping this over the next 3 to 5 years. Again, the last two are a forecast. They're not as detailed, but it's a good approximation. We're keeping our fund balance at about 27%, which is where council wanted it to be, between 25 and 30. It gives us a little flexibility if we need to dip into that at any time. But it's important to note that we're not planning on adding anything into that. But I just wanted to show in general how consistent we have been over the course of the last few years of keeping our revenues and our expenditures very stable. Is there any questions as it relates to general fund before I move on to the enterprise funds? Again, to the public, this is council's fifth view of this budget. Maybe, okay. Major local streets, again, it's the same story to tell. The significant portion of the work that's being done for major and local came from the road bonds, again, that were approved by our residents. We have 3 series of bonds. This first series was about $17 million. There's a long list of roads that are getting repaved, so I didn't list them here, but on our website, in our city's capital improvement plan, you can actually, it's very interactive. You can click on the streets and see where you are. We have a forecast of streets that are coming up in the next few years, but we do know, I always have to give the caveat that things do change, but for the most part, you can kind of see where your road falls. So the majority of that money is coming from the street bond. Sanitation. This one is, we're excited to report that we are moving single stream this year. Currently, SACRA is working on the new MRF building. That more than likely will not be done until November, but we have received word that single stream will start prior to the MRF being open. We're still not sure of the date. It's anywhere between July and September, and as soon as we know more, we absolutely will start promoting that with our community. People will get an opportunity to have roll-off carts. Will allow much more room for recycling. And options for those that, if it's, if they don't want that large of a roll-off, there will be opportunities to get a smaller cart as well. But we're really excited about the single stream that's coming. And we actually anticipated that. We worked through that last year in our budget. And so one of the things that we did is we planned ahead again for the cost of that. So that's already been banked into our rates. And I like this slide again because it goes back to the original conversation I had about the challenges that we are being faced with as it relates to our millage rates. So the sanitation fund is also subject to Headley. And so what was really interesting is when you look at our revenues in the sanitation fund, we're actually only seeing an increase of about an average of $12,000 a year from our millage rate. So everything else has to come in rates. And so we have about an average of 4% increase each year. 3% is a 3% increase each year in our hauling fees. So that's 3% of that 4%, and the 1% is, the other 1% is a lot of, is our costs and/or the fact that we're not getting any more revenue. So this, to me, just goes to show you again the challenges that we're being faced with Headley. If we were able to take full maximum capabilities of our millage rate for sanitation, our fees wouldn't be as high. So it's, at the end of the day, it costs what it costs for sanitation, but that's why people will see an increase in their fees versus an increase in their taxes for that particular portion. So I wanted to give a history as it relates to sanitation rates. Again, we're going to see an average from 18, 19, and 20 of 4% each year. And we did just go back out to bid. We are part of SACRA. And so they had just recently of last year went back out to bid. So we were able to hold steady with our hauling rates at about 3%. Auto parking fund. I don't know if anybody knows, but we're looking at a parking deck potentially. So what we did when that fund was really accounted for what potentially would cost for a bond, as well as we put money in for parking support as it relates to temporary parking strategies. We had to take into consideration that typically your first couple of years of having a parking deck built, you see some revenue loss as you're getting people into the parking deck. And so we took a lot of those into consideration on the auto parking fund. This fund for sure will come back for a mid-year adjustment. We just targeted what we could and what we knew to be true at the time. So I will account, though, that one of the things that keeps coming up is that we have promised that we're working with DPW that we will not be redoing any parking lots while we're in construction. So we're moving around some of our parking lot. The plans we had for parking lot maintenance have been moved around to accommodate that. So that question comes up, so we like to bring that up. So again, that fund will be revisited in the mid-year adjustment, I am sure. So the last one is our water and sewer. This is such a fun one. We've done a lot with this fund. We've been up and down a little bit just due to some of, really trying to right the ship and making sure that that we have the right rates at the right time. One of the things that we started in 2015 or 14, I believe, I think it's 14, is we had Plant Moran look at what we call a smoothing model, a 5-year model. So this year was the first year, or actually, so I think it was 2015, I apologize. 2016 is the first year that we use the smoothing model. And we, every year, will update that, so we're kind of always be, so right now, once we turn in this budget, we'll get another 5 years and we'll smooth it out again. So what you'll notice is that there's about a 3.5% increase in 17, 18, and 19. That is, we have over $2.5 million in capital planned for water and sewer. So you'll see that primarily makes up the increase as it relates to why costs are going up. So we are a pay-as-you-go community as it relates to our capital needs for our water and sewer. And so again, once we have the model, we'll re-smooth it again and make sure that we're keeping rates as steady as possible. Is there any questions on water? Again, with some of the changes that we've made, I know they're still going up, but costs continue to rise. But at the height in 2012 at 110. In 2020, we're still not back there yet. So we have made a concerted effort to reboot and really take a look at our fee schedule and how we do our fees in water. Any other questions on that? So this is on one slide for everybody to see what they can expect from the city over the course of the next year. I think that I am thrilled with our team that we were able to put together a 3-year budget with a 2-year forecast beyond that. I think that was very helpful in the conversations that we had, and it allows council to be very strategic and forward-thinking and know and understand what our risks are over the next few years. And I think that obviously there'll be some changes when you go that far out, but to just have some kind of idea of where we are is so helpful in our decision-making, and I really appreciate council's push to really move us in that direction. So I don't know if council has any more questions or any points of clarification they want to give, but other than that, I have finished my
Well, it is a public hearing,
Yes.
correct? So
yes, it is.
that's the introduction.
Yes.
And at this point, I would open it up to the public and ask if there's anyone from the public that would like to address council on the resolution to adopt the new budget. All right. I don't see anyone. So I will close the public hearing, and then I would open it up to council for questions, comments, thoughts.
I would just, through the chair, I don't have any questions. As the city manager pointed out, we've seen this a lot. But that's a good thing because I think I'm really happy where this budget's landed on, particularly the fiscal responsibility that this council has shown through the years and in this budget as well, and it reflects in the next 5. So I just don't want anybody to interpret lack of questions